Hi, I'm Amanda Morgan, and this is Not Just Cute, the podcast, where we discuss all kinds of topics to help bridge the gap that exists between what we know and what we do in early childhood education. We're starting conversations with academics, authors, decision makers, educators, and parents so that together we can improve the quality of early childhood education, while at the same time protecting and respecting the childhood experience. Before we jump in, a quick reminder that the Why We Play letters are on special pricing right now through the end of August. So if you're planning on using those letters to help educate parents and start conversations about the importance of play, this is the perfect time to grab them. I am especially excited to be adding Spanish versions of each letter within the next week. These are not add-ons or upgrades. If you purchase the letters or if you've already purchased the letters, those Spanish versions will automatically be included in your portal. We are all still figuring out what school's going to look like this coming year, but the fact that young children need play is a fact that hasn't changed. Check those out and grab a sample letter at notjustcute.com/whyweplay. You can find show notes for this episode at notjustcute.com/podcast/episode 35. Today, I'm talking about this new crazy school year and some of the thoughts that I hope will help you as you get started. So let's jump in. It's back to school time, and normally that means getting back to the structure of something familiar. But this year is totally different, and it's different for each of you. Depending on where you are in the world, you may be going back to school with few changes at all. And for others, your entire room and every procedure has changed. And for some, you're completely online. I've been thinking about how to kick off this new school year with a pep talk of sorts and somehow address all of these challenges and all of these differences in a way that applies to each one of you in your unique circumstances. So there's this one thought that I keep coming back to, but I have to make a little detour through some educational law, and I promise it will all tie back in. So in the United States, we have something called the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA. And one of the concepts in that act is the promotion of the least restrictive environment. And what that concept means is that there's a spectrum of care for individuals with special needs. And that can range from fully integrated in the classroom to in-class support, pull-out support, separate classroom support, separate schools, or all the way to institutionalization or homebound care. So there's this wide continuum with points that I didn't even mention there. And our goal is to give children with disabilities an experience that is as much like their typically developing peers, while also meeting their special needs. And that's where least restrictive environment comes in. It says, find that point on that continuum. Find that point where you can meet those special needs in the least restrictive way possible. So find the point on the continuum where you are as close to the general education experience as you can be, while still making sure that you don't overlook those unique needs of the child. So I want to challenge you to take that perspective to this year. There is a continuum between the ideals that you have for what your classroom experience should be, and all the way on the other end of that continuum is a big no to all of it. For many of you, you can't be on that ideal end right now, but that doesn't mean that you have to be all the way over in the land of no. There is a continuum, and we have to find that point that is the least restrictive environment. We all crave that normalcy over there on the far end of the continuum right now. Don't let go of that ideal. I'm hoping and praying that we return to that as soon as possible. But for now, we have some unique needs and they need to be met. We have health and safety standards and requirements that we need to follow, and that requires some changes. So find what your least restrictive environment is. Think outside of the box and find the point on the continuum that lets you get as close to your ideal as you can while still meeting the unique requirements of the moment. So let me give you a few examples. You know that sensory play is important, but depending on the standards and requirements set in your school, it's likely that you can't do it in the way that you have in the past. But that doesn't mean that you can't do it at all. Can you do something outside? Can you set up individual stations outside? Can you Create individual tubs. Can you send something home? Where is your least restrictive environment? Find your point on the continuum. Let's talk blocks. Maybe you're not able to use your block area like you did before. Are there individual building supplies that you can use? Legos or popsicle sticks or cardboard boxes? Maybe the children can't cooperatively build in the block area, but could you create a city by inviting each child to build a structure for your own classroom city block? So they're working independently per the social distancing requirements, but you're working collaboratively as a group to make something bigger. If you're meeting on Zoom, can you share those structures or even drawings like you're having a tour through a city? Here's another example that I saw on Instagram from a fantastic teacher, Mr. Basurto. I'll share the link in the show notes. Mr. Basurto knows that greeting his students and building relationships is really important, but social distancing changes how he does his morning greeting. So he's put together this collection of awesome hand signs that he has posted and that he gets to share with his students. And you can find the links to those through his post that I'll share in the show notes. So every morning and throughout the day, his class is sharing a connection through this secret code that they have through their sign language. Now, I'm sure that Mr. Basurto has several other ideals at the end of his continuum for how he would like to connect with the children in his classroom. But he's found something on the continuum, a point that is the least restrictive environment that will satisfy both the safety requirements and the need for connection. And while I'm sure that the ways he connects with his students will change as the safety requirements change, I wouldn't be surprised to learn that the hand signs maybe stay. I'm hoping that as we innovate and as we find new ways to meet needs, we may have some sweet surprises and a few discoveries that we carry with us back to that ideal side of the continuum. Now, I want to give you a little homework assignment. Take out a sheet of paper, or maybe several sheets of paper, or maybe a big poster or whiteboard if you're a big thinker. Now divide it into 3 columns. Label them from left to right with what, why, how. On the left side, under the what heading, make a list of all the things that you want to do, all the things that bring you joy in your work, and all the things that you feel are important to do for these kids. In the next column, write your why for each one. Why does that matter? Because here's the thing. When we know our why, it helps us to see the how. Because if we have to innovate and do things differently, we have to get back to the core of why. Mr. Basurto's why was connection. If he got hung up on the what of how to give a high five, then he'd be wrapped up in plastic or buying gloves in bulk. But he knew that his why was about connection, and that helped him to find new tools to help him meet the same purpose. And if you go through this process, and the why turns out to be that we just do stuff because we've always done it that way, then maybe that's just something we can cross off the list. I'm a silver linings girl. I am going to try to find the positive in any situation. And maybe that's because I'm an optimist, and maybe it's because I'm also an ornery contrarian and I like to challenge things and flip them on their end. But one silver lining that I see in all of this is maybe it will shake the cobwebs out and help us to get rid of some of the things that we did just because we always did. And maybe this challenge will help us to be more intentional. So write down your why for each of the things in your what column. And then in the third column, brainstorm your how. How can you meet that same purpose within the constraints that you personally have in your situation? What is your least restrictive environment? In making your adaptations, I hope that you find innovations and discoveries and opportunities for growth that will carry over and make you better even in better times. I also hope that you remain clear about the why and about the ideals that you hope to return to, because someday, hopefully in the not so distant future, we're going to need to remind people that the adaptations that were made for this specific time are not the best practices of better times. They are the best practices, as in this is the best that we can do right now. And that is our least restrictive point, and that is heroic work right now. But we can't forget, and we can't let other people forget, that there's so much more that's waiting for us when the restrictions lift and when we can work at the other end of the continuum fully. Last of all, I want to remind you that two of the most important factors in early education are the relationships and the communication. And you can do that in any situation. Whether you're in person or remote or whatever, you can do that. I'm not saying it isn't challenging, but you can do it. Show children that you care. Teach them that they matter. Engage them in conversations about ideas and get them to think out loud. You can do that even with the challenges, even if it's not done perfectly or ideally or the way that you wish you could do it. You can and you do still make a big difference for children and for families and for our future. You are amazing and you have got this. Thanks again for listening to Not Just Cute, the podcast. You can find show notes at notjustcute.com/podcast/episode 35. You'll also find links to resources mentioned in this episode and to the sample letter for Why We Play. I'm Amanda Morgan. You can read more on my blog and sign up for the Not Just Cute newsletter at notjustcute.com.